Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hope you guys had fun last night at the party. And we'll make this session fun. I know it's been a long conference, and we're all ready to go home. So in today's session, we'll share our story, how we use Tableau Server and scale it across all lines of business, and how we run a .com operation in a government agency. And also talk about how we give data to people to enable self-service at scale. And we'll run through some of the use cases and walk you through some of the dashboards and how different lines of business use Tableau Server at Covered California. So my name is Charanjit Gill. I enable people to get insights from their data. I work in IT, and I manage the data management and analytics platform at Covered California. And I've been working on data warehouse and BI implementations for the past 10 to 12 years or so. And I'm here with my colleague, Isaac.
I'm Isaac. I manage evaluation and research at Covered California, our various research initiatives, including with outside researchers, and then also partner with CJ to build a lot of the operational analytics that we use at the organization. My background's in public policy, so I'm more of like the business user.
All right, so my name is Charanjit. I go by CJ, if that makes it any easier. So here's the quick agenda. We'll talk about what Covered California is, give you a little bit background, what we do, and then we talk about the analytics challenges we were facing in the last 2 to 3 years, and how we came up with our new Agile Analytics strategy. We'll go through our current architecture, and then we'll review some of the use cases and the impact that Tableau had on our organization. And we'll talk a little bit about future plans and answer any questions at the end if you have any questions. So with that, I will hand over to Isaac to give you guys a brief introduction about what we do.
Great. Thanks, CJ. So we're Covered California. We're the state health insurance exchange in California, also known as the Obamacare marketplace. And California was the first state to set up a marketplace under the Affordable Care Act. And so we've been in operation. We launched on October 1st, 2013, and have been enrolling people since. And we're a public entity. We're a state agency, but we have some independence. We're run by an independent board that's appointed by the legislature and the governor, so that gives us a little bit of independence. And actually, before I go any further, we did just want to check, how many folks in here work in the government sector, either as a consultant, either as a vendor or as a civil service employees in the house? Anybody, folks in the healthcare sector, insurance? Oh, lots of people. Okay, great. Anyone who's working with an exchange directly, whether Affordable Care Act marketplace or like a private exchange? Okay, great, a little bit. Thanks for that. So our mission is to increase the number of insured Californians, to improve healthcare quality, lower the cost of care, and to reduce healthcare disparities in healthcare. We're really proud in California that, all across the country, the Affordable Care Act has reduced the number of uninsured dramatically, but I think nowhere more, or at least almost nowhere more than in California, where we used kind of all the tools of the Affordable Care Act, whole hog, Medicaid expansion. Medicaid, of course, the program, a lot of healthcare hands, so I don't need to explain Medicaid. Yeah, we're good, yeah. Program for, federally funded program for low-income people to get lower, no-cost health insurance. And then also through the marketplace, we, in a couple of years, reduced our uninsured rate from 17.2 to 7%, which is a first step. Insurance isn't the same thing as care, but we're getting there. And then the specific results in California. So that's great. We're a big purchaser. We have 1.3 million enrollees, so that makes us a pretty big purchaser of care, though technically we're not exactly the purchaser, but we're negotiating on behalf of a lot of enrollees. We have a lot of premium dollars, about $6-7 billion flowing through the health plans that insure through Covered California. And then since we've opened our doors, while we have about 1.4 million enrolled at any time, we experience a lot of churn. The individual market is a place where people come in and then they leave. Most people still get their insurance through their job. And so we experience a high level of turnover in our marketplace. Just in general, you guys probably all know about this, but in the marketplace is the place you also come to get to see if you're eligible for a tax credit under the Affordable Care Act for help paying for your premiums. And so about 9 out of 10 of our enrollees come in, find out they're eligible for a tax credit, and receive an advanced tax credit through Cover California. Before we go any further, whoops, now we're in play mode. Before we go any further, we just want to know, we're going to talk about data and dashboards and numbers, and we just always like to remember, a little bit, we'll take the 60 seconds to note, every one of those numbers is like a real person's story of experience with care. Also, as a side note, Cover California is a marketplace that believes that marketing is an important feature of getting people to enroll in coverage, that you actually have to convince people that health insurance is something that's worth paying their monthly premium for. That's in contrast to the federal government has now decided it's not really going to spend much on marketing.
1 month after subscribe to Cover California.
We have one of our consumer stories.
Can we switch to the video, please?
Oh dear. Is there a magic button for that? We thought we had it all tested.
Sorry. I should have embedded video in the PowerPoint. I need to play this video on the projector. Thank you.
One month after I subscribed to Cover California, I just woke up in the morning with a huge headache and a stiff neck. So I went to the hospital and they told me we're gonna open your brain. And following the open brain surgery, I got a stroke. So I spent 2 months in rehabilitation to relearn how to walk, how to talk. I still have some difficulties, yeah. I still have a slurred speech. Yeah, you have these little difficulties, but I'm alive, so I won't complain. Yeah. My brain surgery and my rehabilitation would have cost $2.5 million. And right now, thanks to Cover California, I only have to pay $7,000. And the fact that Cover California could take care of this was amazing, yeah.
So one of the things that Sarah's story, and lots of stories like this in covering a million enrollees, reminds us is that every month of coverage counts. So if people are having gaps in coverage, potentially huge ramifications for our enrollees, and that's something we're going to talk about that our dashboard has helped, that Tableau's helped us to address in a use case up ahead. The only other thing I just want to note is one of the things that lays the context for the analytic challenges that we had is that the Affordable Care Act, we had to stand up these marketplaces very fast. A lot of money, there was a lot of establishment grant funds to help us in kind of startup fashion, but it was a very short timeline. And some of you remember healthcare.gov kind of struggled out of the gate. Not all of the states that tried to stand up these application websites within that short time frame were able to succeed. And I guess as one recent public policy commentator noted, who knew that healthcare could be so complicated? But in our case, I think it's next slide. Is it on next slide? Yeah, in our case, what that meant is that there was a rush to get stood up, and some things had to be pushed off and delayed and deprioritized, and analytics and BI capabilities and reporting were part of that. So a couple of things that make our analytics environment challenging. We're a state agency, so we're beholden to legislators and we're beholden to stakeholders and advocates who want to have public meetings and do Public Record Act requests and hold us accountable. But we're also trying to operate as a self-funded, fee-funded through our enrollees business. We're a sales organization. We're trying to convince people to enroll in coverage. So that kind of dual mission right there already complicates the decision-making environment. And then third, we're an organization that's governed by a board that has a very public mandate and a purpose to transform the delivery system. So we're trying to kind of be a disruptor in healthcare all at the same time. That creates a lot of differing incentives. Just to go back for 1 second, on what we are fundamentally is, as CJ noted, is this public website where people can come in. It's like a new product. It's like you'd have a product website. It's an e-commerce website where you can come in, determine your eligibility, in real time according to federal standards, federal rules, and then enroll in health insurance. One of the other things that means is that we're very dependent on these other data systems, our health insurance data systems, and the federal government's data system, and the Medicaid agency's data system, just to develop our own application and our product. And so that makes our software development lifecycle way complicated. You can have multiple bosses and decision makers, and it's really hard to move things in a fast and efficient way. And then, as I noted, because we're still maturing, the rush that we had to launch meant that things were put on hold, and we've been kind of recovering in analytics ever since then. The last thing I'd note is that, and some of you can probably relate to this who work in government, it's really hard for government to do data work well. So the default for complicated systems development, the default is fixed price deliverable contract from a huge systems integrator, gajillion dollars over a whole bunch of years. And you have to have your business requirements all defined in advance, and then you get what you get, and any changes after that are going to be expensive. And that was kind of the environment we were operating under at the beginning. That doesn't work really well when you're a brand new startup doing something new for the first time. So with that, I think I'm handing over to CJ, right?
Yeah.
All right, take us away.
So as Isaac mentioned, think of a startup when you have like $100, $200 million grant, and you have to build 6 months, and you're against a deadline. So you get vendors that you have applications that are developed in-house in Java, .NET. You have every cloud player like Salesforce, Eloqua, Oracle, ServiceNow. So our landscape was complex. So we had so many endpoints where data was. And we had all flavors of ETL tools integrating with all these different databases. And we had the whole Cisco telephony stack. We have like 2,000 service center agents who are at 3 different geographic locations handling phone calls. And then we have all the social media that our marketing team used to engage with the citizens of California. And on top of this, to analyze all these endpoints, we had every flavor of the BI tool you could think of. We had Tableau, SAS, Power BI, Excel, you name it. So the challenge was, how do you connect to all these endpoints and make sure you provide data to the analysts so they're not spending 80% of their time trying to wrangle with data versus 20% analyzing data. It should be the other way around. So the challenges were, we tried building up a data warehouse. We spent 2 years. It was time-consuming. You give requirements. Who knew how the exchange would run? So ETL is slow. We have siloed reporting systems. Every vendor stood up their own environment, and every COTS product has its own reporting engine. But as an organization, how do you get 360-degree view across all these endpoints? And it looks like a spaghetti or a hairball architecture to an ETL developer pulling all this data from all over the place.
Is that Cal here?
I won't say. And then the other challenge we run into every day is the data gap. People in business, they know what the data means and how to actually draw conclusions from that data, but they don't necessarily understand the complexity in the IT systems and data models behind and how the data is done. So on the IT side, we know how to build systems, but we have no idea what that data means or what kind of conclusions we can draw from that data. So there's this data gap between business and IT, so we needed to come up with analytics strategy where we work together as a partnership with IT and program areas to make sure we come up with the solution that works for all. So
we have this nice quote that CJ brought. In God we trust, all others must bring data. And then more specifically, bring it right now. So you guys everyone's familiar with this. Everybody wants their information right away. So one of the things that happened for us was they said, okay, in order to not have the stumble out of the gate that healthcare.gov had, we put a lot of non-critical path activities on hold in 2013. So it's like, reporting data warehouse, let's deal with that after we launch. We got to get people enrolled, which was the right decision. So that was fine. Except that then what happens, like October 2nd, how many people signed up yesterday? What kind of people? What was the racial ethnic composition? Where did they sign up? What time of day are they signing up? What percentage of them converted? Who started and didn't finish? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we actually do want this information. So what happened, just to take you back kind of where we were, when we first started, during the first open enrollment, this is kind of what the workflow looked like, literally. We had a fixed, a defined in advance extract with our systems integrator that had been defined like a year beforehand. Like, this is the monthly data file that you're going to receive for your marketplace enrollment. And it took them like a week every time. When they were running it for the first time, it like took them a week to figure it out and get it to run right. And then literally they didn't have the SFTP wasn't figured out because they couldn't figure out the security stuff. So we drove over there and put it on a USB and drove it back to, I'm not kidding, drove it back to the office. And I do get to say, this was before I got involved in the data work. I don't know if that helps. Then a team of people who had never managed files that large were trying to figure out in SAS, which this is like the 1980s method or whatever. They're like using SAS to then put the file in Excel, which the data analysts that we had at the time, like that was the tool they knew how to use. It was like, then we can create some pivot tables in Excel. And I was like, wow. So it took, 7 to 10 days to get enrollment data and a whole team all that time, just to tell you like how many people had enrolled yesterday or 10 days ago. To fast forward, so then we were like, well, that doesn't work. So then we made it through year 1 of open enrollment and we survived. And then it was like, okay, you guys bought, what we bought in our contract with our systems integrator to build that whole website application was they had promised and we had agreed on a data warehouse solution, because that sounded like a good industry standard solution. Okay, great. So fixed deliverable, fixed set of requirements. We had to submit all those requirements before we'd even open our doors for business. We'd never even gone through what we call a special enrollment cycle or a renewal cycle. We hadn't even done those as a business, but already the requirements were set for the data warehouse. So then by the time that system launches in year 2, if you can go back one. So by the time the data warehouse launches, the business has totally changed how it wants to count things, what metrics it thinks are important. So, but by then you had this fixed price deliverable that already got launched. And so changes to that, or it's a change order, it takes months, it costs a huge amount of money. So we kind of wandered in the data warehouse desert for about a year and a half before realizing, like, this is not a solution. And I said, CJ, help us. And CJ saved the day.
So what you see on mode 1 is, I think we all lived last 10 years building a data warehouse thinking it will solve all our analytics challenges. This is a much more controlled environment, but it takes a long time to get it right, and there's like usually 6 months to a year implementation. And you might, at the end, it might not be the product you asked for. So mode 2 is where your modern BI tools such as Tableau or Power BI come into picture, where you want to do things on the fly and you don't have time to wait for requirement gathering. You pull out your analytics tool, connect directly to your OLTP or application, and get things going. So I see as data warehouse, I mean, for small to mid-sized businesses, as like it's slowly dying because of the time it takes to build and then get actionable insights from that. And mode 2 is where you see all these disruptors where you can do things better, faster, cheaper. And that was kind of our guiding principles for our analytics strategy, that we needed to standardize on one platform. We cannot support every tool, BI tool in the IT shop if we are offering it as a service. And we decided to institutionalize and standardize on one product. And it's easy to train employees and do training and development on one platform. We wanted it to be team-centric, so every team can focus on metrics that are relevant for them. And there's a strong business focus and 360-degree view across each lines of business, and improved security and authoring workflows, like what data goes out to the public before we have our internal review process. Then how do you segregate financial data, sales data, marketing data, policy-related decisions? So we created all these like projects that we'll show you on Tableau dashboard. That enhanced security, and it let the team focus on data that was important to them. And then collaboration. Everybody had work products on their network drive or their personal computer in SAS or Power BI or Tableau. But on server, once you start publishing, you can actually leverage all these work that has been done by your colleagues, and you minimize the redundant efforts. And we created curated data sets that reduce the ETL complexity, minimize redundant efforts. And last, the big one is time to insight. If you're doing analysis, whenever there's like a new policy proposal, today you have Affordable Care Act or new Graham Cassidy or Better American Healthcare decision, like you have to be very quick to respond to the citizens what it means to you. This is what you have today, and this is what the new proposal would mean. So you can't wait for a data warehouse or a vendor to get back to you in 7 days. So you need to do time to insight is we reduce development time and right information at the right time. We use mobile apps, so you can just have, in some cases, we have real-time data. We'll show you one of the dashboards. So why did we choose Tableau? We decided to go on-premise because of all the security constraints we have to abide by, federal IRS security and state franchise tax board guidelines. And the other fundamental decision is put your analytics tool where your data is. In our case, 80% of our data is on-premise, so we put analytics tool next to our data set. Built-in connectors, you don't have to hire developers to build connectors. Like most of the cloud endpoints that we use, Tableau already has connections that you just enter your username, password, and you can connect directly. And Tableau, there's a return on investment. It's a truly disruptive technology. You can do things better, faster, cheaper, and we believe it's the best use of taxpayer money. So we did a quick ROI analysis. If you can count the number of employees who have Tableau Desktop licenses, 8 core license plus Desktop is $365,000 a year. I think Tableau doesn't offer perpetual licensing anymore. They're into a subscription model now. And if you have a, let's say, employee hourly rate of $50 an hour, and hour saved per day is 2, you're saving $25,000 per employee per year. And it adds up very fast, and you can see going to Tableau Server pays for itself in less than 8 months, and it's all return on investment from that year on. So quickly giving you a current architecture. In order to build a more modern BI team, you need to have people who understand our data architects who can design the database. You need ETL and database developers. Then you need a team who can do front-end visualization development to create really stunning visualization of the data. And then you need data scientists who can do statistical modeling and forecasting algorithms. So it's a team effort. You need people from IT, data science, and business all work together in order to deliver actionable BI product. So we see all the endpoints, cloud or on-premise. We call these our data sources. We have an on-premise Tableau server. If they're simple, lightweight queries, then we just have a live connection to the endpoint, and it's sometimes few kilobytes, no delay. And if you need a complex ETL where you're doing databases across database or blending data from cloud to on-premise systems, we do that on our SQL server, and then we make it available to. So Tableau is our enterprise presentation layer of all the data, and then use the publisher and publish it to our server, and our consumers can consume it whatever device they have, iPad, mobile, or. And now Isaac will actually walk you through some of the dashboards that we have built.
So, and I regret that because we couldn't get privacy approval, we can't show the dashboard live, which I'm sorry about. So we had to like gray stuff out and all that. But a couple of key examples. So I mentioned earlier that idea that it's really important to make sure consumers get continuity of care as they move through coverage systems. So one of the things we learned kind of early on, and this is a little bit old data, but basically in a given year, we might cover about 2 million people fully, but only 1.3 million are covered at any time. So we churn out about a third of our membership every year. And the average length of stay is about 2 years in covered California. So there's a lot of people who are moving in and out of job-based coverage, and also in particular in and out of the Medicaid program, and that's an area of real sensitivity. So in this little slide is just showing that of people who leave covered California coverage, what was their source of coverage a year later, or of people who had ever been covered during the year 2015, what was their source of coverage later in 2016? And so we conducted a survey. I think one of the footnotes is missing, but most of the people who left coverage with us, they didn't go to be uninsured, they went to another source of care. For Medicaid in particular, for those of you who are working in healthcare or in this kind of area know that the Affordable Care Act set these income-based eligibility limits. So in California, where we expanded the Medicaid program, if you're a single adult and your income is under 138% of federal poverty, which is about $48,000 a year, somewhere give or take, you're eligible for the Medicaid program. If your income moves above that amount, then you're eligible for a tax credit through the exchange, through the marketplace. And most consumers may readily have an experience where they're employed, that they're in a modest income, let's say $40,000 a year, you get a tax credit through the exchange. You lose your job, suddenly you're unemployed, now you're eligible for Medi-Cal. So there's this program transition. And most of the research going into setting up the exchange suggested that probably 300,000 to 400,000 Californians in a given year would be moving between the two programs. And so it's an area of great sensitivity. And again, this is one of those things where people thought, well, in California, let's see, I think the next slide in California, we did something where we used the same basic application, our Covered California eligibility engine, to find where a consumer can come in and apply for both Medicaid and the marketplace tax credits at the same time. And in a lot of in healthcare.gov, it doesn't work that way. It's like you go and you find out about healthcare.gov, and then if you're eligible for Medicaid, then that's up to whatever state agency. They hand you off to the state agency. In California, we tried to have it be a one-stop shop where people could get their eligibility and know that day what kind of coverage they would get. And so everyone thought, going into the process, it was like, oh, well, the system will just tell us about people who've transitioned from one program to the other. But again, as that same problem described in the earlier example, report requirements weren't really clear. A new state law goes into effect governing that people should spend no more than 45 days transitioning between the two programs. If you're with Covered California and your income changes and now you're eligible for Medicaid, it should take you no more than 45 days to have that change of coverage experience. Well, suddenly out come these, the system change goes in, and they threw a report in with some requirement, it was like a fixed report, and lo and behold, it doesn't answer the question. It doesn't, once the system functionality goes in and people are being transitioned out of Covered California and into the Medicaid program, and the business is saying, well, how many people are transitioning? How many days are they spending? It's like, well, this report, we can't make sense of it. We don't know. We can't figure it out. And so that led us to basically a kind of a pretty quick, a few weeks of intense work in a more agile approach to come up with a live dashboard of consumers who are transitioning out of Covered California into what in California we call the Medi-Cal program, our Medicaid program. And again, I'm sorry I had to gray out this stuff, but basically what we've got is we can look at now, business is super happy. They can see every week how many people are flowing out. Of the ones who get sent to the county, we have a county-based eligibility process for the Medicaid program. So you leave Covered California, you go to the county, and then the county has to take action on your case within those 45 days. So now we've got a dashboard that, not quite real time, but at the speed that the business needs, which is weekly, it's refreshed, but it's fine for them. They can figure out which counties are meeting the 45-day requirement, what's the average time for consumers, all the basic metrics to say, hey, are we meeting our legal obligation or not? Are there process improvements we need to make? And then more importantly, is anybody experiencing a gap in care? We want to make sure that nobody has a gap in coverage. So that was one really great example. And then same in the reverse direction. So in the reverse direction, there's always been this question of, well, hey, Covered California, you should be growing your enrollment from all of these people who lose eligibility for Medicaid because their income increases. So if I'm unemployed, I'm on the Medicaid program, but then I get a job, and now I'm eligible for a tax credit. One of the things that happens is that in the Medicaid program, as soon as you're found eligible, you get your insurance card in the mail, more or less. You get your insurance card in the mail, you can go see the doctor. With Covered California, you have to first be found eligible, then you have to go in yourself, choose a plan, pay a premium, then you can actually have effective coverage. And that little step there is a big deal for someone who's used to a Medicaid environment and maybe doesn't know that they need to pick a plan with Covered California. And from the time we launched, and this is one of these big topics, in healthcare policy, this transition is like a big topic. It's like, how do you move people between this eligibility barrier? And from the time we launched, we were not able to get data that felt consistent and reliable about this population. So there was great debate within the organization. Is the sales opportunity 100,000 or is it 40,000? And by standing up this dashboard relatively quickly, what we were able to do is to iterate with it, and this is where it really left the world of like the data warehouse model, is we did a first draft. Suddenly the business people who understood all this complicated eligibility policy said, hey, wait, I'm zeroing in on these couple of areas where there's big blocks of population. They were able to identify, then we did a few revisions, got some more data in there, drilled down a little further, and then they were able to identify, I don't want to say a system defect, but a design gap in the way we handled eligibility that was causing, and we're resolving it now, but causing a lot of people to potentially be found ineligible for subsidy when maybe they should be. They should be being found eligible for subsidy. So it's really having access to the ability to do iterative design on a dashboard or on our analytics has enabled us to really improve that experience for consumers and monitor our conversion performance. Similar idea, here we did a dashboard on this idea of consent. There's this thing in the marketplace where when you apply for coverage, the feds stood up this complicated set of federal databases to check you against. So if you want to come in for insurance, you have to prove that you're eligible, that you have lawful presence, they call it, like a certain kind of immigration condition, and that you're not incarcerated, and that you're not dead, and that you're, who you say you are, and that your income is within some certain threshold. And all that gets pushed in real time against these, the Federal Data Services Hub, this stack that the feds maintain. And if a consumer forgets to give us a long enough period of consent, we can't run those checks, and then we can't give them their tax credit. So in the case of renewal, some people sign up with us and they don't give us very much consent. Come the next year, it's time to renew them, we're at risk of having to revoke their tax credit, which for most consumers is worth like that, losing their tax credit would quadruple their premiums. And so the dashboard enables us to, because of this ability to connect to these different sources, these different data sources, we can integrate the outcomes that we're seeing on the application side in terms of the consumer's case, have they updated their consent or not, with our marketing campaigns from our Eloqua different data source, to say, hey, we've been emailing, we've been calling, are those campaigns effective or not? And in that case, we were able to save consumers, I forget what the number is, but a huge chunk of tax credits that otherwise they would have lost. Another quick example, our marketing team, which unfortunately I'm not on, so I can't speak as well about, but they are leveraging the tool to combine all of our social media sources. Apparently, the most popular email at open enrollment had to do with breakfast, so I think people are hungry for insurance. Then finally, do you want to speak about the Service Center dashboard?
Yeah, so Service Center is actually running operations is pretty huge because you have the Cisco telephony system that routes the calls, and in California, we support about 15 languages. There's no wrong door, whatever language you speak. We have agents who speak multiple languages who can assist you. But in order to see real-time data, like how's the average, how many calls are in the queue, what the agent is doing on the phone, like are they in training, are they ready to take phone calls, what's our SLA, how many calls were offered in each language queue, how many were abandoned, what's the average hold time, average wait time. So these are very important metrics when you're running a huge service center, and especially during open enrollment when we take millions of phone calls. You need this information to be real time to take action. So this dashboard updates every 15 seconds. We're using custom JavaScript to refresh the visualization because Tableau does not have the capability, even though you have a live connection to a streaming database, the visual does not refresh automatically unless you hit the refresh button. So there's like custom JavaScript API that refreshes the visual every 15 seconds. So there's a new functionality they said coming soon in the next release. Anyways. So here you can see weekdays and time of the day when we are open. And you can quickly see the calls offered like 10 to 11 a.m. Is pretty busy Mondays and Tuesdays, and it kind of then tapers off towards the weekend. This helps you better shift planning and staffing. So you can see like no training or meetings to be scheduled during these hot windows, and make sure that the agents are available to answer the phone calls. Next one here, you can see for each queue all the languages we support. What's the SLA? The dark green is 100%, and then the color palettes change as the SLA drops. So you can see real time for each language queue, what's our SLA at that moment. And then here on the right is you can see the agents at 3 different locations on the phone. You can see, are there any calls on hold? Are they in a not ready status? Are they talking? Are they, like what's their status on the phone? So if you see we're missing on our SLAs and the phone status says not ready, you talk to all the supervisors on the floor, like find out why the agents are not ready. Are they in training or there's something else going on, to be able to make sure that we get back in the ready state and take the calls in the queue. And this is a real-time dashboard. It's 15 seconds behind. That's actually a Cisco delay that we cannot handle. When the calls land on the call distribution switch, it goes to a Microsoft SQL database, and that database syncs every 15 seconds with the call logger. So we are 15 seconds behind real time in this case. So here's a quick pro tip. Tableau announced this new feature in Tableau Online. You can call it machine learning or AI, but if you need to launch a minimal viable product, talk to your DBA, run this script on every database. It tells you how your business is using each database. So you're mining SQL queries for requirement gathering. You don't have to have requirement gathering session with the business. So you actually, before you even meet them, you see how the database is used. You look at all the joins and all the views, and then that kind of gives you a perspective on how each query, or what are the most popular tables in your organization, how are they joined. So you start mining SQL queries, you run it, and then you see, oh, business is looking for these metrics. So then you kind of work your way backwards in design. Then if you're using Google Analytics, you know what kind of screen they're using, your most top 5 screens in the organization. And you can see most of your new sessions are coming from mobile and tablet, and it's eventually going to eclipse a desktop at one point. So the idea is, you know what data you need, and you know what screen you're presenting on, so you put these together, you can very quickly build a dashboard, and you can hit the ground running day one when you meet with your business. So Tableau Impact, we have 360-degree view of our operations. We greatly reduce time to insight. As you have seen, in some cases, we have almost real-time dashboard, and we don't have to wait weeks and days for a data warehouse team to check in a code, build a OLAP repository. And the other important thing is it's a centralized data connection store. You can see all the popular data sources and the refresh frequency. And if you're a IT shop and you need to install these database drivers for every PC, and then you have to make sure it's a 32-bit version, 64-bit, how often they're refreshed, it saves you a lot of time. Install those database drivers on Tableau server, and then make it available as a data connection, so your analyst doesn't have to know what's going on behind the scenes. They just focus on data they need to.
Just make it work, CJ.
Yeah. So next year, we're going to work on Open Data Portal. We publish a lot of data and reports in Excel and PDF, and we hope to use Tableau instance outside our firewall to have all these visuals and the data. Being a government agency, we collect a lot of data to provide better services to the citizens, but then we are obligated to tell the citizens how we use that data, what it means for them, and how it's used to make decisions, while also protecting their PII, PHI information. So all these dashboards will, we hope to go live next year. And Open Data Portal brings transparency. We share with academic research organizations, helps you with better policy decision and citizen engagement. And we want to go big on the new Tableau Mobile App, because as you can see, our traffic is actually growing way faster on mobile than on our website. Last year, our website, I think it wasn't responsive or mobile ready, but this year it is. So mobile is actually the next big thing. So we want our dashboards and visualizations to be mobile ready. So I think with that being said, we're done with all the slides. So if you guys have any questions. No, it's just a cool term because I worked for startups before joining public sector. So when you talk to a product manager, you want to come up with like a rough draft or a quick version of a product before your stakeholders. So it's just like a quick and dirty way to get the first dashboard ready before you start into like a requirement gathering session. So it's just a fancy name for doing Agile Analytics. It works across. I mean, every database tells you, even if it's Oracle, Microsoft SQL, or MySQL, each database engine stores how these queries are run. So you talk to your DBA, and this is what they do every day. They will tell you which tables are most popular, how they are queried, and how they're joined across. So that would actually, speed up your development time. And Tableau calls this machine learning, but essentially it's mining SQL queries to see how they're being used.
Say, no. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, a complicated question. So I hope I try to get, if I'm going in the wrong direction, just redirect me. I think so we don't, so off the top, providers in California that I'm aware of, there's no provider access to any covered California data. And so that would all go through the health plan. So you enroll through Covered California, you get your coverage from your qualified health plan. That's your insurance coverage. So to the extent that there's a question about, patient presents at clinic and there's a question about whether they have insurance or not, that's a question kind of managed through the insurance company because they have the up-to-date record on them. There is this issue. Well, so I'm not sure so I'm going to go in one direction, and if this is where you wanted, nod, and if not, say, no, that wasn't my question. There's a whole issue about how does Covered California keep its enrollment, or how does an exchange keep its enrollment records in sync with the health plans? Okay, so that was a huge issue for us, and frankly, before the organization had any energy to spend on reporting and analytics, that was the first thing we had to solve. So we set up what we call our
834
REM, I forget what it stands for, but anyway, we have our reconciliation and effectuation and membership. So we set up a whole process kind of outside of our main core system to do reconciliation on a monthly basis with all the carriers to get the latest up-to-date information to ensure that if any data change was happening on enrollment in their system, basically the rule is it's all supposed to come through us. And if we detect something through that reconciliation that they've done on their side to the consumer's history without coming through our system, then we say, rejected, you need to bring that back around through us. So that might be part of the question. Then related to that, there's this other problem, which is when people leave the exchanges, if they stop paying their premium, they have a grace period. And so there's this opportunity where the health plan knows that the consumer hasn't paid their premium, but they haven't yet sent us the termination on the consumer because they're waiting to see if they're going to, if they're in their grace period. And so they still have to pay claims during the first month of that grace period. And that means in our system, people look like they're covered for about 90, 120 days before the carrier finally says, okay, I'm really done with that person. And they retroactively term them like 3 months back. And that creates all kind of confusion where, like at any given moment, I can't really tell you how many people have true paid coverage for a given month because of that dynamic. But part of that gets into we don't accept a certain kind of, I forget, it's the 822, or I forget what the transaction number is, from the carriers about about the payment of premium. And so where other states may have handled that a little differently. So we have it. So some of those might be idiosyncratic problems for California, but there definitely is there's a lot of difficulty in knowing at any given moment, is this consumer really covered? Which doesn't for the health plan, it's clear. Like they should know because they collect the premium every month, so they should know. Now I didn't know if did that answer your question, or were you interested in the Medicaid part also? So in Medicaid, this is where we have this joint system that's doing both the Medicaid determination and the marketplace determination. So there's in theory, when everything works smoothly, when the system finds out that you're being determined eligible for Medicaid, it says, you're cut off of Covered California. And again, there's that 45-day clock. You go into a special transition status, and for that period, you stay in your marketplace plan until the county confirms that you're Medicaid certified, and then once you're confirmed, then you end up in the Medicaid program. And so in theory, it's supposed to work very smoothly. In practice, the Medicaid system is run, it's a different, huge old system. Also, we have this problem that the county, for those of you who want to nerd out on Medicaid, in California, the county is the system of record for the eligibility, and each county has its own computer system. We call it the SAWS system in California. There's different counties are in different systems. The state is the system of record for whether or not you have a Medicaid card, like you can see the doctor today with your Medi-Cal card. That's a med system, different system, database. And then we are the eligibility rules engine for determining eligibility for the MAGI program only in Medicaid, not the age and disabled, not the non-MAGI program. So you have 3 different databases, one of which is actually a consortia of 3 separate databases, trying to together tell the eligibility story about when someone finishes with Covered California and goes to Medicaid. And so it has been like, it has been a real big challenge to get that story straight. And we're actually still, we think we're doing a good job, but people are not yet satisfied that the data is, it's like until the data can show executives and decision makers that like we actually are tracking and understand what's happening to our people, they're not going to trust that the thing is working right, appropriately so. And so we're trying to get the data as organized as possible so that we can actually identify like, hey, are people when they leave, when we think they're leaving us and no longer Medicaid, when we think they're leaving Medicaid and coming to us, are they really no longer eligible for Medicaid over in that Medicaid system? A lot of those kinds of issues we're still trying to hammer out. I don't know if that kind of speaks to thanks for the health nerd question over here. I love it. Other ones?
The big problem we have though is our Medicaid system is run by a vendor, and our vendor will never let us into the online transaction processing tables because it might affect the SLAs for system performance.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you guys got capacity to do that.
I mean, I would say, do you want to take first crack? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think technically speaking, if the vendor's not comfortable with the SLAs because they have to keep the systems up, you can actually do a real-time copy of your OLTP system in your own environment, which you don't have to do an ETL. You can actually use the redo logs of a database, which keeps these copies in sync, so you'll be like few seconds behind the vendor database. But essentially, then you make a replica of the entire, so you'll be actually paying twice for storage, so that kind of like there's a cost for storage, but then you have the agility to do whatever you need, and you don't have to rely on a vendor for SLAs.
I would say we've kind of we're trying everything under the sun. So we've done a little bit of the copy. We did a little data warehouse. We did a little vendor-driven extract. We've done a little copy thing. Now we're doing a little, give us an analytics sandbox over in your vendor environment that you'll support. That's our next kind of phase. And to credit our systems integrator, like they're working with us to try to figure out how to be more agile. So even though I gripe about the data warehouse, they've been great about trying to say, hey, we recognize this maybe wasn't the right solution either. So I kind of have two answers to that question, because from my perspective and more the business side, like our team will never be able to go into the source system directly and figure anything out. I mean, we just won't. But we do, so we need some kind of synthesized model data to some, like number of fact and dimension tables I can count on 3 hands or whatever, something like that. At least for the team that we have that's trying to build the dashboards. But so part of it is that I think part of why the data warehouse thing is slow and hard and all that is because you have to make decisions. It's like, oh, really complicated system, and how should we distill this? What are our metrics going to be? And I think part of our pain was that everybody thought, well, you'll just have this data warehouse and it'll just have how many people are enrolled? Well, that's an easy concept. We'll just put that in the data warehouse. And it turns out until you kind of squish around with the data, you don't know exactly how you want to model that.
And I think history is also a big factor. Like sometimes your transaction systems don't keep history. They always have the latest record. So if you need to build history, you would need another layer of either a database or a data warehouse where you're capturing all the changes that are happening on the data. So it's kind of, depends. I'm not saying data warehouse is bad or it's dead. It's just what works best for you. That's how you decide.
And I think on our side, it was just the realization that the data warehouse is not, it's not the magic bullet. You need some ability to have a flexible environment, a sandbox where you can iterate. That's the key, is being able to continue to refine and refine without waiting 4 months for the next release to be able to get closer, at least at this phase of the business we're at now. Now it could be, there's another part of what we're doing, in some parts, some lines of your business, a COTS data warehouse product may be appropriate. And we have built a claims and utilization data warehouse, a multi-paired warehouse that we've just finished building with Truven Health Analytics that's like basically more or less their COTS product. I mean, it's customized for our particular issuers, but it's kind of like claims data only has so many variations. They can build a warehouse for that that's going to work for that need. Hope it goes well.
All right, any other questions? Cool, all right, well, thank you for joining us. All right, have a great day.
Thanks, guys.